So I was wondering, why is it that my ID is having issues? So why do you think that getting an ID is difficult for this group?
And more specifically, Section 7 also says for any child who is found that has been abandoned in the country and the family cannot be traced, they have a right, they had to be deemed a citizen of Kenya by birth.
So there was this video that was shown, I think, just this week, of a man who actually molested an 8-year-old in an institution, and he was released on bond. So why do you think such a person is given that opportunity, is being released, yet he did something to a child?
Now, the issue is that if there's no physical evidence, it becomes very difficult to prove. And then some cases of abuse, like let's say, for instance, sexual assault, it's very difficult. Sometimes it's very difficult to prove because and even like sexual harassment.
Just another question on the law. The law as it is right now, written and enforced, do you think it favors the rich?
That's a very interesting question.
Welcome to Resilient Voices, a podcast where we uplift the stories, struggles, and strength of caregivers. I am your host, Veronica. Today, we are diving into a conversation that affects many: social justice. To caregivers, social justice isn't just a concept, but a lived experience. From lack of legal documentations to gender-based violence. But today, we are shining light on these struggles and, more importantly, learning how to overcome them. Joining us is Shelmith from Justice Africa. She will introduce herself and tell us more about her. Karibu sana. Kindly just introduce yourself and feel at home.
Okay, thank you. My name is Shelmith Maranya. I am the programs manager at AMCA Africa Justice Initiative. AMCA Africa is a non-governmental organization that promotes access to justice for marginalized persons. So what we do, we bring together, we mentor and work with young lawyers and young law students from university legal clinics and bring them together with grassroots organizations so that they can enable them access to justice. This can look like the provision of legal aid services. It can look like research. It can look like policy advocacy to influence policies and laws. And finally, we do mentorship and advocacy.
So karibu sana. Today I'm dealing with an advocate. I'm really glad. So off to our context, I'm going to read out our context just to give us an insight. So when you leave care, it can feel like you're entering a world that wasn't built for you. You try to get your ID and you're told you need a parent's signature. You try to access justice and no one takes you seriously because you don't have people. Many caregivers in Kenya still face delays or total denial in obtaining legal documentations like birth certificate or national IDs. Many others suffer in silence from abuse or legal exploitation, not because they want to, but because they don't know where to go or who to trust. So we're just going to start from there. What does social justice personally mean to you?
Social justice for us is basically, if I would put it in a sentence, is access to justice for all, regardless of who you are, regardless of your race, regardless of the vulnerabilities that you face generally. It means that everyone is able to use the law to their benefit and is treated equally by the law, which is what is protected under Article 27 of our Constitution.
Mm-hmm. So we're just going to start with we've come across heartbreaking stories from caregivers online, and I'm actually going to share my story. It's about getting an identity card. So after I was done with my Form 4, I had already attained 18. So I went to apply for my ID. But at the beginning, I did it while I was still in school. So it did not, haikurudi. So I had to reapply again simply because I didn't have the the IDs of my parents, but I had the death certificate, but the ID did not come back. Haikurudi venye nilitarajia. So I had to reapply again the second time. Again haikurudi. The third time haikurudi. So I was wondering, why is it that my ID is having issues? So why do you think that getting an ID is difficult for this group?
Okay, so generally the way the law has envisioned the process of registration, it starts all the way from birth.
Yeah.
It starts from birth, and at the point of birth, what the law envisages is, first of all, it envisages a situation where most births are done in the hospital. And then when you're at the hospital, you're given a birth notification form. Or rather, previously, I think it was the yellow card, but over time that has changed. So you're given a birth notification. So this birth notification is the one you're supposed to ideally use to get now the birth certificate. From that point, then you get the birth certificate. Now this enables you to get your ID. So to get your ID now, that's when also they envision a situation where they want your parent's ID, or then if the parent is not there, if the parent has passed on, unfortunately, then you are supposed to have a death certificate. So for caregivers, if the problem starts at the very beginning, because a lot of people who end up as caregivers could be that a child was abandoned. So there's no actual trace whatsoever of their family. So when now it reaches this point, it becomes a bit difficult for them to get. If now they don't have even the birth certificate, it gets difficult to get the ID. And then now for others, Well, there is this. Well, the law envisages this perfect situation. For the caregivers, their circumstances are a bit different. Yeah.
So how are they supposed to do it? Like for them to get this identity card, because there are many opportunities out there that you cannot access without your identity card.
Okay, so first of all, what I would say, the law envisages everyone has a right to registration. Article 53 of the Constitution states that for a child, every child has a right to a name and a nationality. And the law that now implements this is the Children Act. We have a new Children Act, which is the Children Act 2022. At Section 7, it's very clear that, again, every child has a right to a name and a nationality. Also, it states every child has a right to registration under the Births and Registration Act, which is now the law that is used to register births and deaths in Kenya, which, as I mentioned previously, is where it all starts. So, and more specifically, Section 7 also says for any child who is found that has been abandoned in the country and the family cannot be traced, they have a right, they had to be deemed a citizen of Kenya by birth. That is what the law says. So now when you go to the Births and Registration Act and the rules, as I mentioned, so there are these requirements. You need to have at least, if there's no, there needs to be, ideally the ideal situation is there should be a birth notification form, which is now what is used to get the birth certificate. And then after getting the birth certificate, your parents' ID, and this birth certificate, it's used to get you a national ID and even a passport or any other document. However, for caregivers, if it's a situation where maybe one was raised perhaps in a children's home, so there are different circumstances. If the parents have passed away and there's a death certificate, the situation should be a bit easier. With the death certificate now, you can be able to obtain both your birth certificate and a national identity card. But in a situation where now maybe for some they don't have the death certificate, right? Because perhaps the parent passed away, they were a child, they don't know who has those particular documentation, or unfortunately they have been estranged from their family or relatives. So in a situation where maybe they are there's a relative, there's a grandparent, there's perhaps an aunt or an uncle who is your guardian. These can be used, their ID can be used to support you to get the birth certificate. Now, in the extreme situation where you find like a child was abandoned and so there's no trace at all of any relatives or even trace of the death of their parents or something. So there's something we call, if the child was raised in a children's home, what the Directorate of Children's Services is doing right now, it's supporting them to get the birth certificate and documentation using the commuter order, whereby where there's that commuter order that placed them at a children's home, which is the ideal situation. Because if you're placed at a children's home, there should be an order of the court that has placed you to stay there permanently. So the commuter order is what now is used to support you to get the birth certificate and to get the national ID. So in your birth certificate, instead of having the usual mother and father, what will be there is the caregiver. So it will be your caregiver. So if your caregiver is like your guardian, perhaps like your grandparents took you in, your aunt took you in, then these will be the one, the guardian will be the one who is written there. But then now in the extreme situation where now maybe you're being taken off by a stranger completely at a children's home, then you can be able to, the children's home, one of the persons of the children's home will be written in your documentation as your caregiver.
Hey, I tried all those, and yet my ID, I had trouble getting that ID card. So let's talk about inheritance and family disputes. We have these children who have been raised in care. Then at a certain age, you're now told you have to go out there, look for all the means to support yourself because you can no longer stay in the institution. Yeah. So is there a legal pathway for them to get justice on that?
Okay, so first of all, when it comes to inheritance, every child has a right to inherit their parents' property. If there are any assets left behind, every child has a right. And with the new constitution that we have right now, this doesn't matter whether it was an adopted child, doesn't matter whether it's a child what previously would say born, what you would call previously at is illegitimate, which the law doesn't allow right now. Those are children born out of wedlock. So when you start there, every child has a right to inherit their parents' property. But then now, for the inheritance to go ahead, ideally what the law envisioned specifically is children should benefit from their parents' property even when they are young, even when they are minors.
Yeah.
So ideally what happens is the law places a guardian to hold this property in trust for the children. For example, I can use an example of land. If it is land, the property would be placed maybe if there is an aunt. Let's say the caregiver is someone who had an aunt. If it's an aunt and an uncle who are taking care of them, the court can give an order giving them a right to hold the property, but in trust for the children. What it means to hold something in trust, it means they can't sell it unless with an order of the court. They can't otherwise dispose of that property. However, now when these children get to 18, this property should be transferred to them. But then I understand all these things are in the law. And then also what we say in legal terms, we say the court cannot move itself. So it cannot act suo motu, it cannot move itself. What it means is that someone has to apply to court for this to happen. So if no one is applying, that now gives an opportunity for people to take advantage of those properties. So ideally, so for you to start all this process, first of all, you have to even know, was there property that was left? Because if you don't know whether there was property that was left, it becomes a bit difficult. Number two, someone has to do the succession process. You have to file documents in court for the succession process. In Kiswahili wanasema ni kustaki kifo. I don't know if you have heard of that. Kustaki kifo. So like the succession process is through which you go to court and say, this is my parent, they died on this particular date, they left this and this property, and now we would be like the court to give us permission, which you call administration, permission to administer this property. So this can happen in two processes. First, it can be where your parents left a will. That is the ideal best situation. If a parent left a will, then in their will already they have said who is to take the property, and if they have children, who is to take care of this property on behalf of their children. So the people who are given the responsibility in the will are supposed to file a succession case in court, and they'll be given letters of probate, that they will be given documentation that will allow them to now administer this property. So it allows them, so in the will, if they are adults and the beneficiaries are minors, what I mentioned before, they'll hold the property in trust. So maybe even if it's, let's give another example of like plots. If it is like plots and they have like some... they are generating some income. So the court will direct them through the will, what did the parent who passed away want the money to be used? Did they want them to be placed in a trust? Did they want this money to be used to pay the children's school fees or something? And then what they should do now, they are supposed to report to court about this. And when these children are an adult, they should transfer the property to the children immediately. The other situation, which is the most common, is the one where we don't have a will. So when someone dies and they do not have a will now the people wanafaa kwenda kustaki kifo and the people who are given the first priority are the spouse, if there was any spouse, and if maybe both parents have passed away, the children. But then, of course, as I mentioned, there are children who now are not adults. Because they are not adults, they don't have a capacity to bring a case to court in their own name. So that's when now guardians come in. That's when now their aunt, their uncle, their grandparents, and also now where none of these are in the picture, then even it can be a caregiver. It can be a caregiver, like someone who has, even a stranger who has adopted this child legally. And also now in the other situation where there's completely no one in the picture, that's now when the government can do this on behalf of the child. So when they do such an administration, as I mentioned now, because the children in the picture, they are not supposed to be disinherited just because they are children. The process should be, the property should be, as I mentioned previously, be placed in trust to benefit these children while they are growing up. And then now when they have all grown up, the property is transferred to them. This person should not benefit over that property and disinheriting the children. Now, I know your question will be now, this is the perfect situation, and it doesn't always happen like that. So you are maybe a caregiver, you are an adult now, and you want to go back and inherit what your parents left that is rightfully yours. So in such a situation, when that happens as an adult, the good thing is the law does not have a limitation period for succession cases. So it doesn't say like, oh, now it's been 20 years, that's it. It's been 30 years, that's it. If you actually go to court, some of the very oldest cases are succession cases. You will find even a file from 1990 or 1980 still ongoing. So what you can do as a caregiver right now, if you get someone to give you legal advice, you get a lawyer who can advise you on the process. As long as you know the properties, you can go back and check the succession process. You can start the succession process as a whole. If you start, even if there's someone who has benefited from that property, they have to compensate you and they have to transfer that property to you.
Okay, what if the caregiver doesn't have the legal document showing that the deceased are his or her parents? What is he or she supposed to do?
Or that means in a situation where there is no birth certificate.
Yeah.
That becomes a bit difficult because the one thing that proves someone is your parent is a birth certificate. So ideally what happens in very extreme situations, actually, but this happens mostly in cases where people are challenging that this one was the child of the so-and-so who died. In very extreme situations, someone can apply for the body to be exhumed and a DNA to be conducted, which is very extreme. And then I know that can happen if it's very difficult if it's like someone died 30 years ago.
Yeah.
The other thing, you can have DNA with the relatives of this person, just to show that you get a court order to label you, get a DNA. If someone is challenging it, you can just go and say you're unless someone is actually challenging it. First of all, and then also even before you go to the DNA, if you have people who can testify to the fact that this was indeed the child of so-and-so, if you have people like maybe you have even neighbors, you have relatives who can testify to that in an ideal situation, that would be okay. But if people are challenging it completely, then you can even ask the court to order a DNA of you, because if you're related, like for instance, my mother's sister, that is my aunt, right?
Your aunt, yeah.
My aunt, of course, if a DNA is done between me and my aunt, there has to be some closeness that shows that we are related somehow.
Okay, so what should caregivers know or do when they face abuse? Are there any systems that are in place to protect them?
What kind of abuse?
Let's talk of gender-based violence.
Okay, so the law is not discriminative when it comes to gender-based violence in terms of this one is a caregiver and this one is not a caregiver. Gender-based violence is outlawed generally. If it's rape, it's outlawed generally. So what you do, you take the action like any other person. If it's like sexual violence, you have to report within 72 hours. That enables someone to be able to get the medical evidence that will support the case. So you report to the police station, you're given an OB number, and then you're directed now to the hospital so that you can be tested, so that some evidence can be taken, and also you can also be able to get healthcare services in terms of Perhaps you need some medications, perhaps you need to be tested for some STDs and all that. So you go to the hospital and you're given these services. And then now the police will start the investigations, and then they're able to arrest the perpetrator who has done this to you. And after they have arrested him, him or her, they are charged. They are charged in court, and then the process of the criminal process proceeds. It is very important for you to support the criminal process. In terms of cases, I hear people say the wheels of justice are slow. So the cases take a bit, because of the backlog in court cases, and also when you look at the number of policemen we have and the ratio of the citizens we have, there is a very big discrepancy. So cases take long, but it is important for you to support the case to the end, because also as the complainant or as the victim, if you stop supporting, because I've seen cases where people over time, they start losing hope and they stop going to court. If you stop doing that, stop going to court and all that, it becomes the other person wins, because then you have not supported. And then the other thing I would say is currently, the law allows for the victim to have legal representation in criminal cases, separate from the prosecution. So ideally, in a criminal case, there is always prosecutor who represent the victim and the state or the republic, and now the perpetrator and their lawyer, if they have a lawyer or they choose to represent themselves. However, right now, the victim is allowed to have another lawyer, and a lot of non-governmental organizations offer such support, like ourselves, Amka Africa, we can support someone. In that sense, this enables us to follow up with the process to make sure we are holding everyone accountable and justice is served.
So there was this video that was shown, I think, just this week, of a man who actually molested an 8-year-old in an institution, and he was released on bond. So why do you think such a person is given that opportunity, is being released, yet he did something to a child?
Yeah, so generally, the criminal process or the law, basically, what came up with this process, what informed the whole process of bail, bond, and the criminal justice process, basically, justice is looked at not from the side of one person, but rather when the judge sits here, they want to have justice for both people. That is why there is the right to fair trial. The right to fair trial means it won't happen like the way before we had this constitution and long ago, where you'd find someone amefungwa in some dungeon somewhere, and no one has they have not even been given an opportunity to defend themselves. So the Constitution has a right to fair trial. The right to fair trial means one has to be heard. They have to be given an opportunity to be heard. And number two, they cannot be judged as guilty until they have been proven to be guilty. The guilt has to be proven. That's number two. So that means someone cannot be punished. That's why people have been having this argument of protesters who are given a bail of like 100,000. That's like, it's basically judging someone, or rather convicting someone before even their case has been heard and the process has been taken through the whole process. And then there's a principle, a very old principle that informs the law, where it says that it's better to have 10 criminals outside than have one innocent person in prison. So it tries to avoid that situation. So that's why as a right of all arrested persons, every arrested person has a right to one, of course, to be informed of the charges you're being arrested of, and to be produced promptly before the court of law. And when you go now through the process, the criminal process is that once you're arrested, when you go there, we do what we call plea taking. Plea taking ni, if you watch vionja mahakamani, kusomewa mashtaka. Ile unasomewa mashtaka in a language that you understand. So you'll find even like in rural areas, the court clerk, there's always a translator who translates things to Kimeru, to the vernacular languages. So after that, now you have an opportunity to apply for bail or bond. This allows you to listen to your case when you're outside, giving you an opportunity that is trying to avoid the situation where someone who is innocent, because imagine if someone is innocent and they have been arrested and then they go stay in remand, and you'll find like in places like industrial area, the people who are there, most of them are people who are in remand and they are unable to afford the bail or the bond that they were given. And then you find you've stayed like, because of, as I said, the wheels of justice are slow, so your case has taken 3 years. You have stayed inside for 3 years, and then after that, the court determines that you are innocent. Imagine the injustice that has been served on that person. they have stayed in Nini for 3 good years or even more, and then the court has found that they are innocent. So the court tries to avoid this situation. That's why someone is given an opportunity to apply for bail and bond. But then another thing I would mention, it doesn't mean the victim's voice is completely shut. During the application for bail and bond, that's why I've said it's important for the victim one to attend court. Another thing that is very important is for people, because the general public doesn't understand the court process. And those are things like that we, like ourselves, Amka Africa, try to come in and resolve. Because if you're not understanding the court process, you're not even able to use the opportunities that have been given to you in your favor. So back to what I was saying, the victim, during the part of applying for bail and bond, they usually have an opportunity to object to the application. So that's why the prosecution objects to such an application. And number 2, the victim, if they have a lawyer, they object. But even the prosecution, like you object, they're objecting it on your behalf as a victim. They object to this. And what you can raise in such scenarios, if someone is threatening the victim, they are not given bail on board. You can, as long as you show we have evidence this person was doing and this, you can object and they can be watarushwa ndani. The other issue is if someone is a flight risk. That you hear that a lot actually in the media, politicians are arrested and all that. Flight risk, that it means if someone is likely to leave the country. So that's why you find if it's a foreigner, it's very hard for them to get bail on bond. So is this someone a flight risk? So you'll find someone who has been arrested saying, oh, I live in Kino, these people know me, and I work at this particular place, everyone knows me there, I'm not likely to go outside. But also if you find like someone, like people who mostly are arrested for drug trafficking, the crimes that involve, that are over cross-border, Jesus. Crimes that are of cross-border nature, they have a very hard time getting bail or bond, because now the state is, the court is seeing this person is used to traveling a lot. The chances of them leaving the country are very high. So there are very many factors. The court didn't just sit somewhere and decide this person to be given bail or bond. There are so many factors that have been taken into place based on the circumstances of this person. When you're seeing a case in the media, we are not seeing the court documents. So we have no idea what is happening in the court documents. And that doesn't mean when someone gets bail or bond, now they'll just continue with bail on board until the end of the case. It can be cancelled. For instance, if you've been told not to move from the vicinity, let's say you've been told not to move from this particular country, and then you attempt to do that and you're arrested for it, then your bail and board is cancelled. Number 2, as I mentioned, if you're intimidating, threatening the victim, or tampering with the evidence, and someone raises that, the prosecution raises that, or the victim through the advocate or even themselves raises that, then it becomes a question. So what I would say, even in a situation where you don't have a lawyer, sometimes because you feel like lawyers are intimidating, even you said you have an advocate in the podcast today. And those are the bridges that AMCA tries to bridge, because of lack of information, lack of accessibility. Most courts right now are online. Yet in Kenya, not many people have access to the internet, to online. I know of a woman who came to us because she was going to Milimani Law Courts kuendea link ya kujoin court. She was coming physically from Machakos hapa to get a link. That is something that literally can be shared on WhatsApp. But because of that barrier, those are the barriers that people like us, Amka Africa, try to bridge. Because we inform you, we usually do a lot of legal information sessions. We do paralegal trainings, just to enable people get knowledge. And we also do a lot of legal sensitization on our social media pages. So that someone can understand the process and understand what they can do. Because as a victim, if you're a caregiver, it's the criminal case is ongoing, someone has been given bail or bond, they are threatening you. Maybe first you should tell the prosecution. The prosecutor ni ule wakili wa serikali mwenye anakurepresent. You tell them so that they raise it. Ukiona ha raise, you just raise your hand. Trust me, in courts, even as an arrested person, if you raise your hand, no one will refuse to allow you to speak. Unainua mkono, unasema, during the court session, hata kama siku inasikizwa mambo ya bail and bond, yaona huyu mtu alikuja akaanza kunithreaten, kuniambia nini nisiendelee na hii kesi and all that. The moment you raise that, trust me, that bail or bond is going to be cancelled immediately, yes.
So let's talk about these children who are molested at a young age. Then they're still young and naive, but when they grow up, they remember, like, when I was young, this thing happened. So at that age, can justice be served? Like, there is no physical evidence at that time. So can they get justice on that?
That's a very good question. Now, another thing for criminal cases, they don't have a limitation in terms of time. You can begin a criminal complaint and a criminal case at any time. But then now the challenge that comes with that is, again, when it comes to criminal cases, the proof is beyond reasonable doubt, which means there shouldn't be any shred of, it doesn't mean like hakuna doubt kabisa, but at least when a reasonable person sees and starts to think like, huyu mtu anasemekana siku alikuwa kwa hii nyumba, but at the same time CCTV inamuonesha somewhere else. If there is such small doubt, the case is cancelled. So the burden of proof is very high. So basically, sometimes even as Amka Africa, we look at a case and see if we pursue this case, this victim will just cause them more trauma, because the justice process is very rigorous. You'll have to recount what happened to you. You'll have to be asked questions. I know a lot of us watched the proceedings ile time Elisha Ongoya alikuwa anauliza maswali. If you remember how, and this is political, how those questions were very, even you with the truth, you can't be there and the questions you're going to be asked, you will answer them, but then they can really be detrimental to your mental health. So sometimes we analyze it and we see it's not really worth it. But then, so what basically I'm saying, legally you can do it. But also the challenge is also you could lose. There's a small chance you could lose. If you have a lot of evidence, you can win. The evidence sometimes even is just having a lot of people come out. You have seen cases where, but mostly these I've seen it not in the country, whereby so many people have come out and said, maybe in a situation like this particular leader assaulted us as children. One person, 20 people, 30 people come out. If everyone is coming out, then even if it was 20 years ago, then that makes it easier to prove something. But then now the issue is that if there's no physical evidence, it becomes very difficult to prove. And then some cases of abuse, like let's say for instance sexual assault, it's very difficult. Sometimes it's very difficult to prove, because and even like sexual harassment sometimes is just someone saying some words to you. You get how difficult that is to prove. So what I'm saying is it is possible for you to get justice. But also at the same time, it could be a bit difficult because of the issue of evidence.
So what should someone do immediately after experiencing molestation?
Okay. So as I mentioned, the first thing, so this is a child or in an institution or...
Yeah, let's talk about the institution.
Maybe a child in an institution. Yeah. So the best thing to do immediately is, first of all, it's important for us, even in institutions, to be able to educate children. That's why sex education is important. For children to be taught about, to know what is wrong. You know, sometimes children don't know what is wrong. Someone is touching them and they don't know what is wrong. So first, it is very important for children to be educated on what is wrong, and if this goes wrong, where to report it. So when that is done, it becomes easier for the children to come out and report. Now, the other thing it's important to set up systems is to have systems set up in an institution whereby a child can go and report to someone. So the other good thing is for them to tell someone. I know this can be very difficult sometimes because the person you're supposed to tell maybe is the person now is assaulting you or molesting you. So after that, now the person at the institution, what they should do immediately, that should be reported to the police. The police now also refer you to the hospital where now the child is being given help and the evidence is taken out. And then after that, that's when now the police start the investigations and begin the whole criminal process.
What if, yes, it's happening in an institution, but the workers are trying to cover it up?
Okay, so when that comes now, that puts the institution in against the law. The institution against the law. There are situations where an institution can be completely deregistered. Actually, right now with the Children Act, it's very protective of childhood institutions. That's why for the longest time, there has been a moratorium on adoption outside the country, where people have not been allowed to adopt children from Kenya and take them outside the country because of such cases. Right now, the law is very stringent on CCIs. Right now, zinaitwa CCIs. The charitable children institutions. So right now, it's very... stringent. So if you're someone else who is aware of this, you can come together and report this, make sure this is reported, and besides doing that, report this to the Directorate of Children's Services and the National Council for Children's Services to ensure such an organization investigations are done, and also it is even deregistered and not allowed to continue keeping children. The same happens with cases of orphanage trafficking. Right now that is happening a lot, whereby some people are going to in rural areas, they are taking children, bringing them here in Nairobi, telling them wamekuja kusoma, and then meanwhile the children are placed somewhere for this to be able to siphon funds from somewhere, and they're not allowed to reach out to their parents, they're not allowed to go home, they're in very terrible situations. Some are not even doing the education that is actually there. The responsibility is us who are even outside those institutions to speak up. Even sometimes I know some people go to ask youth, you organize maybe on Saturday to go to a children's home to visit children. Sometimes you interact with those children, right? And you could get some information from those children, or if you see anything that is not looking okay, make sure you report it. Even if ukishindwa kwa polisi, then you should go to the DCS, that is the children office that is near you.
Okay, so legal aid is a big gap for caregivers. Most don't know where to go, can't afford a lawyer. Where can they start when they need help?
Okay, so there's a lot of opportunities for the provision of legal aid in the country. So first, there's the even the judiciary itself allows for legal aid. In some cases, if someone is entangled in any case, if you speak to the court clerk, you speak to someone at the court, they could be able to assist you, whereby there's a list, there are those lawyers who have been listed to provide free legal aid services. In that the judiciary compensates them and then they provide services for you for free. But also on the other hand, we have so many organizations. As I mentioned, like AMCA, we do provide free legal services. I know organizations like CRU, they provide legal services in places like Kibera when it comes to things actually relating to gender based violence. So what I would say the best thing, try call any of these organizations. And even sometimes when you go to some of these organizations, we are linked to, because sometimes I do receive cases from the police. Sometimes the police calls us and refer cases to us. Also, sometimes the children's services, children office, they refer cases to us because someone has gone there and they really need help and they're seeing this person needs legal aid and they know they can be referred to these particular institutions.
Okay, that's interesting. So, just another question on the law. The law as it is right now, written and enforced, do you think it favors the rich?
That's a very interesting question. You will have to be very specific which law, because first of all, we have so many laws. That's number one. Number two, society. You see, you can't. The law and society are two very different things, yet they are still they are very interconnected in different ways. Society, the law sometimes follows society, like society believe you should not kill, right? Whether it's religious, whether it's cultural, right? And then the law comes and creates the crime of murder, and the opposite, whereby now you find society follows the law. For instance, previously in many cultures, FGM was a cultural practice, right? But the law came and outlawed the FGM. So what happened is now society is forced to follow the law. So I think I can't really say that the law favors the rich. Just that, but also I understand I cannot really also say your statement is wrong, because I understand where it's coming from. I know sometimes you could find situation where, of course, like the rich are the ones who are able to get the big lawyers, right? Easily. The rich are the ones who are able to access information as well, easily, more than you, or not you, more than the poor, sorry. The rich are the ones who are able to access information easily than the others. And when it comes to bail and bond, if you find the rich has been arrested kwa maandamano, maybe atatafikishwa kwa police station, atapiga tu simu somewhere achiliwe. So you're right and you're also wrong. I don't know. It's iko tu hapo. Society is very unequal. Okay. Unfortunately.
So how can we involve men and boys in the conversation so that violence is not just about women?
Okay. So I would say, first of all, violence, of course, starts with what we believe, with our beliefs, with our utterances. It starts very small, with us. It's us changing society as a whole, and we all have, of course, to work together. If at a small age, we allow boys to act a certain way, and we don't question them, and then now we insist that girls must also act another way, which they must be meek, and these others, they must be. It's like the conversation of sex. When a teenage boy has a girlfriend, it's not much of a concern. They are exerting sexual dominance, which is considered masculine, right? But when a girl gets a boyfriend, it's all, they are not being chaste, they are not being meek, they are not being what they are supposed to be. But then now that creates a very different conversation, because this one now, if you have been taught to be chaste, that means sometimes consent. You will be chased about consent. You are not sure whether, if you go with someone to a house and I don't want to do this anything anymore, should I say no, or should I be chased because girls are supposed to be quiet? This other one, on the other hand, you have taught him that sexual dominance is masculine, so they don't understand consent. They don't understand women's pain. So we all have to start from how we are raising the boys when they are little, how we are also raising the girls when you are little, and then together now we'll be able to combat gender-based violence. And
Nice. So as we wind up, if you could propose one law or policy today to promote justice for care experienced youth, what will it be?
Okay, I would say perhaps we might need to put it on paper to make it a bit flexible. I was trying this morning to find the specific sections of the law that provide for caregivers or orphans or anyone who, like, actually with the registration process. So I would say that would be the first place to start. Have a particular, like in the law, have something that is very specific and to, in a situation where someone doesn't have all these documents that you're talking about, how are they able to get documentation to make it a bit easier? But I would also say, in Kenya, we don't have a problem of laws. We have a problem of implementation. We have so many good laws, but the issue is implementation, because even if we say maybe we bring a new law to have care leavers, already the law is there. As I mentioned, the constitution is clear: every child has a right to a name and nationality and registration. So that means already every child should be registered regardless of their situation. Every child should be registered. So I think what we have is a problem of implementation, and I'm hoping we can all work together, be it the CSOs, be it the government officials, to be able to work together to be able to ensure caregivers are able to enjoy their human rights like any other person.
So your final take to our caregivers out there who are struggling, what can you tell them?
I would say there are opportunities for you to get assistance and to get help. If you can, share those opportunities even with other caregivers who are not aware. As I said, there is an issue of lack of information. So if you're able to reach out to an organization like AMCA, tell them I have this and this problem. Even if AMCA is unable to assist you, because sometimes you're not able to take up everything, we are able to use our networks to reach out to someone else who can be able to assist you.
So thank you so much. It was such an interesting conversation here. I've learned so much from you, and I'm also looking forward to implement some of the things you have taught me today. So thank you for your time, and to our caregivers who are going through the struggles that we've talked about, reach out to KESCA or AMCA. Is it AMCA Africa?
AMCA Africa Justice Initiative.
That one. There are platforms, to get more information. Until then, stay informed, stay curious, and stay resilient. Thank you for watching.